This is Dear Strategy, episode 135. Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product, business, and personal strategy. I'm your host, Bob Caporelli. This is episode 135, recorded in June of 2023. So welcome back, strategy creators, to another great episode. Today, I'm going to get back to kind of the topic of business strategy, but I really want to talk about something that I've been reading more and more about. I've had conversations with people about, and it goes back to the origins of strategy and how it applies to business strategy. Now, when I wrote my book, which I'll do a shameless plug for, Creative Strategy Generation, published on McGraw-Hill Education, back in 2015, available at Amazon and all fine booksellers. But when I did that, wrote that book, I kind of really approached it from a standpoint of taking all of the traditional strategic concepts that we know and love in business and really trying to bring them back to their origin stories, right? So many times people will reference SWOT analysis and, all of Michael Porter's different tools and various different strategic theories and frameworks and so forth that have been written about a lot. But many times they don't kind of go back and credit the source, not from a standpoint of infringing on anything, but rather because these concepts are so well known and so ingrained that sometimes it's even difficult to trace the origin of some of these things. So I painstakingly went back and really tried to trace the origin of some of the most common theories and frameworks that we know and love, and really went back to their origins. And I did the same thing with the overarching kind of process of strategy creation, going back to the origin of strategy that's rooted in military strategy. Of course, that's centuries old, but even if you take a more modern military view of strategy, just the idea of analyzing yourself, analyzing your enemy, analyzing your environment and terrain, understanding what your goal is, trying to anticipate what those three inputs will eventually do, and then putting a plan together that allows you to achieve your goal based on what you think is going to happen. So that's essentially the basis of military strategy. And that's the basis of how it became translated into business strategy, right? 'Cause it's basically the same thing. You have a goal, you have yourself, you have your competitors, you have your environment, and you anticipate what those things are going to do and put a plan together to achieve your goal based on what you think is going to happen. Now, all of that sounds great, nice, neat on paper. And when I teach my classes, I talk about that, right? And I talk about it for one main reason, because if we think of ourselves in a situation where we're going to battle, it's pretty easy to think about the things we need to consider. Again, ourselves, our enemy, our environment, our goals. And so it's kind of an easy analogy, so that when you do try and translate these topics into business, you can think to the more simple view of, if I was in battle, what would I be thinking about? Well, it's the same thing in business. As hard or as complex as we try to make it appear, it's really just that simple. So the military analogy works. I think it, kind of is true to the origins of strategy. And I think it's a good one for at least the purposes that I use it for. However, it has been disputed, not necessarily by students of what I teach and things of that nature, because I think I put it in the context that I just talked to you about. But I've read several articles, several theories and things of that nature that say, well, this whole view of, competitive strategy in business is wrong. There isn't an enemy in business. There's not a one winner, one loser kind of a scenario. And so that whole analogy is flawed. In business, instead, what we should be thinking about is there could be multiple winners in the same space, and they could all thrive kind of together. And there was one particular article that I was reading. It was very interesting because they were kind of turning their nose up at Michael Porter's theories about competitive strategy. Those of you who, study strategy, took some classes in business school, you probably have run across Michael Porter's work. And his whole thought process and frameworks are around this idea of competitive strategy, which again does kind of have its origins in a military context. And so this article went on to say why those concepts are not right. And, it's all about cohabitating. They referenced or quoted another author, Joan Magretta, who made a different analogy and said strategy is less like war and more like the performing arts, where you can have multiple singers that thrive, multiple artists that thrive in the same space. And that's really what strategy is about. Interestingly, in quoting Joan Magretta and saying that quote was anti-Michael Porter, kind of an interesting approach in that article, because Joan Magretta is anything but anti-Michael Porter. In fact, she's written several books that kind of explain Michael Porter's work and embrace Michael Porter's work. One of them is called Understanding Michael Porter. The other one is kind of a comic book version of Michael Porter, I believe it, called What is Strategy? Great read, actually, and I highly recommend it. I love it. Simplified version of what Michael Porter's work is. But in any case, clearly she is not against Michael Porter's work. And I think what she does is try to explain it, that he was not saying that there is a kind of one winner, one loser type of a scenario. In fact, his work does embrace the idea that in business, there are going to be multiple competitors that can all thrive in the same space. The idea is to find out how you can be different than another competitor so that you could both thrive together, not necessarily beat each other up. And there have been other works that have kind of gone down this analogy, blue ocean strategy, same type of thing, saying, well, you don't want to play in red oceans where, you have competitors that are beating each other up to bloody pulps, right? What you want to do is play in blue oceans where competitors aren't swimming. So lots of different ideas on this, and all of them kind of come around the same thing, that, hey, in business, it's not about one winner, one loser. It's about multiple winners all competing in the same space, as long as those multiple winners can coexist. And usually they coexist by being somewhat different from one another, right? So that's kind of the idea behind it. But because this particular analogy had to do with the performing arts, which resonated with me a lot because I'm, of course, a musician, a composer, all of my work around strategy really focuses on the creative aspect of strategy, which I think is one of the more important things to focus on. But this analogy really resonated with me. And I said, I want to dig into this a little bit more because, it's true that customers have kind of an infinite appetite for different performing artists to enter their world, right? So is that really the way business operates, or is it more like the military analogy? And so kind of digging through that a little bit. And here's what I come up with. I think when we consider business being more like performing arts, where there are multiple winners in a given marketplace, I kind of think that's flawed, to be honest with you. Because yes, in business, we're going to look at a marketplace and we're going to recognize that there are multiple competitors that are going to exist within that marketplace. We're not going to be the only one. We're not going to dominate it. So there's not a singular winner and a singular loser in that scenario, if you consider that we're all playing in the same marketplace. But I don't know that what you're fighting for is the marketplace, right? What you're fighting for is the share of a customer or of a set of customers. You're fighting for a share within that marketplace. And in that situation, that share does have a singular winner and multiple losers, right? So if I'm fighting for 30% share in the marketplace, the 30% I'm trying to get, I want that to come to me. Yeah, the 70% of the marketplace that I'm not as concerned with, that can go to someone else. But I am fighting a battle for the 30% that I want, right? And assuming that 30% is looking to a singular solution for their problems, which we'll get to in a minute, then it is like a battlefield. Even though in the marketplace, there could be multiple people competing and coexisting for the share that I'm looking for, I'm still fighting a battle. And so I really do believe, not just because I wrote about it, because I've thought about this a lot, that the military analogy still works, right? As long as you apply it to the share that you are trying to obtain, or hold on to. In that case, I think it works well. Now, where it might not work as well is when the product or solution that you are providing to your customer base is not the only solution that people are looking for. So take the performing arts, right? Take music. A customer has a large capacity for multiple different artists to supply them with entertainment. They're not looking for just one singular artist to entertain them. They're looking for multiple sources of entertainment. So in this particular case, they are willing to buy music from multiple different people, okay? A singular customer with an appetite to buy from multiple different places. In that case, then the military analogy might not be quite as good, because in that case, I am going to be one of many solutions that this customer is ultimately going to choose. And I need to think about my marketplace or my battle even through that lens. I don't think that that situation exists for many things, right? Clearly things that entertain us, things that make us feel good, collectibles, those kind of all fall into that category. But I don't think it really matters how many products fall into that category or not. I think what really does matter is that you define that for your products. So if you are supplying a product that a customer is going to buy multiple versions of from various different competitors, then you need to consider that in your strategy and think about the fact that you will coexist with your competitors for that customer share. However, if your product is a singular solution, as probably most of them are, then you need to consider that in your strategy and say that, yes, there will be a singular winner for the customers you are fighting for. And in that case, you need to consider that into your strategy. So that's kind of the way that I would put this together. Now, one other thing that I want to cover is in the situation where there are multiple competitors that coexist for a singular customer's share or mind space, is that really not like military strategy? This is kind of an interesting thing as well, because we assume that military strategy involves two distinct parties fighting each other for some territory, some cause, and one wants to completely beat the other. But that's not usually the way it goes, right? Usually there are two parties with some conflicting interests, but there are also many other parties in the form of allies that also have interests in whatever is being fought for. And there's kind of this complex field of quote unquote competitors that are all trying to coexist and can't all coexist. So they end up having some type of a battle, right? But it's not one-on-one fight to the death. Usually it's usually many on many fighting for multiple interests in the same space. I think that's more accurately where the war analogy gets applied. And then let's not forget that the outcome of most wars is usually not the complete annihilation of one side or another. It's usually some type of a compromise where all of the parties involved end up coexisting, right? Now, one might coexist a little bit more comfortably than the other, but they do all end up carving out their space in whatever environment they were fighting for. So again, although I don't think the military analogy is perfect in all situations for business, I also don't think that it's completely opposite of business or doesn't work for business. I think it still does, as long as you apply it the right way. So I come down to the performing arts strategy. Yeah, that works well in situations where there's multiple winners for a given customer. And the military strategy, that works well as well for situations where there's a singular winner, and maybe even situations where there's multiple winners, depending on how the military strategy analogy is executed. So I wouldn't be so quick to say that one works, one doesn't, whatever else. I know consultants love to do that because, help sell books or write papers or anything else. Somebody wrote something and it's easy to come in and say, that doesn't work anymore. This is the way to do it now. I don't know. I think it kind of all works, right? You just got to put it through the lens that you're comfortable with. And that makes sense for you. So hopefully that helps put some things into perspective. Maybe it's inspiring to you. Hopefully makes you think about some things maybe a little bit differently than you were thinking about them before. So if you have something that you want me to talk about on the show, something on your mind, please go out to dearstrategy.net, use the contact link there, and feel free to ask away. If it's a topic that resonates with me, I'll try and address it on the show. Also, if you're interested in any of the training or coaching that I've referenced here, you can go and check that out through Strategy Generation Company. It's a company I own and founded. All the training that I do is through that company, and you can visit us at strategygeneration.com to learn more. While you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.